There's an issue which continually arises and which concerns me greatly. So I don't know how it will concern you or whether you really give a rat's ass about it, to be quite honest. But it is certainly about what's happening in Gaza and how whatever it is the Australian government is doing at this particular time, how the right wing media perceive the actions of Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese. My concern is that people like Sherry Markson, as I will demonstrate to you in a moment, are doing their darndest to breed anti Semitic responses and to demonstrate to us all that they are, in fact, not anti Semitic. And what they need to understand, I think, is that um, I'm I'm certainly not anti-Semitic. I'm anti lots of things. I'm anti the Australian government from time to time. I find myself anti the United States a lot of the time. Um, I'm I'm not particularly anti. Well, I'm not anti any particular group, apart from those who endeavour to solely focus on division, to focus on differences, as opposed to trying to find solutions to problems. Now, Sherry Markson and Murray and Bolt, all those people on the opinion part of Sky News, endeavour to, on a daily basis, sow a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness without resolution to any of the problems that they tend to raise, whether it be Indigenous issues, whether it be the economy, whether it be um, emissions from cars, whatever it might be. The government, the right wing, just do not. I'm going to do a post on this at some point about what oppositions do, both Labor and Liberal for that matter, in terms of not presenting policies. But in this particular instance, I'm actually concerned about the things that Sherry Markson has to say in relation to Gaza. Now, I believe that these people breed division and create a sense that there's one side versus the other. And this is not, and I stress, this is not about Jewish people. This is, for me, about Israel and the Israel government. And we need to be clear about redefining what this is about. This is about Palestinians having access to their own land, and that an acknowledgement that the Israel government are practicing in a form of apartheid right across Israel, and particularly in the West Bank, and of course now in Gaza. But not only in Gaza have they been practicing apartheid by separating these people by this wall, they have also participated in a genocide. And what does intrigue me is that it is known, I guess, that there's about 3,000 people, 3,000 Israels or people for the IDF have been killed during this conflict, as opposed to over 33,000 people, mainly women and children, that have been killed. And there's no reference to that. It's almost like somehow the Palestinians do not matter. Um, and and these people, they call themselves Zionists, but I do need to tell you that Zionism takes a whole host of different forms. It's just not one sort of fit one idea, or part of that ideology fits everybody. It doesn't. There are varying forms of Zionists, but there's a Zionist trend that says that Palestinians must be eradicated. There's also a trend in Palestine, or amongst Hamas leaders in particular, that Israelites, the people who have Jewish faith or who are from Israel, need to be eradicated as well. I do not support either of those views, want you to know. But there is a middle ground, and somehow we must find it, I think. And so I'm going to play this clip, which is a combination of two lots of clips I've got. One is from Sherry Markson spouting her shit, and the other one is from a expert, which is an interview by Henderson on SBS that I found interesting because you'll see Sherry Markson offers us the extremely emotive view as to what's happening in terms of a Zionist perspective, because she declares she's a Zionist, probably not really understanding or knowing even what Zionism is, or even what attributes she holds around Zionism. So, because she's friggin' ignorant, let's be honest, versus someone who's relatively intelligent, who works for the United Nations and has got a sense as to what this really means, and particularly as Australia's involvement. So I'm going to play aspects of this. I'll probably stop it along the way just to criticise Markson because it's worth doing, and then and you'll listen also to what this SBS interviewer had to say.
And Anthony Albanese are rewarding a terrorist group for killing Jews. Israel is currently battling a defensive war to eliminate.
Now, I think it's worth noting here that at no point does Markson talks about the IDF. Now, they're not. This is not about Jewish people. It's not about a religious conflict. This is simply about land and the rights that people have to land, to property, to a sense of home. This is what this is about. But she wants to make it about religious, and she's talking about, you know, we go back continually to what happened on October the 7th last year, and which is horrific. Everybody acknowledges that. No one says, oh shit, that was a good thing what Hamas did, attacking all these people. But there's a couple of things that we need to acknowledge. Firstly, I think we need to acknowledge exactly why this happened. And, you know, if you've been living in an environment whereby you've been basically captive by a group of people and you find an opportunity to take vengeance, you probably will. The type of vengeance they took and how that's been reported has been horrific. No one's denying all of that. There must have been a different solution. But somewhere along the line, it boiled over and these people took the matter into their own hands and decided to enter Israel. Now, I'm not saying, look, it's just wrong. I'm a pacifist. So that idea of that is wrong. End of story. The response, though, is also wrong because I'm still remaining a pacifist, taking the attitude that the Israel the government have taken is just, it's catastrophic, to say the least. That for whatever reason, we need to destroy and wipe out all these Palestinian people because there are people that the right wing in Israel believe that Palestinians must be exterminated. Now, I find this a bit strange and rather contradictory, given the Jewish people have been set upon, fought against, and people have tried to eradicate them, particularly the Nazis, obviously, for centuries. They have suffered more than any other group of people I can imagine. And I think it's sad that for whatever reason, the Israeli people, not just Jewish, the Israeli people feel the need to justify the persecution that they've experienced for generations. They feel somehow the need to do the same to the Palestinians. And this history goes way back before 1948, the formulation of Israel. This goes back centuries, but it's ingrained. And at some point, frankly, it has to stop. And neither side is right in terms of trying to eradicate the other. But the problem is that the Western world now needs to try and do what we can to sort it out.
To eliminate Hamas for slaughtering entire families, depriving children.
And you've got to ask, well, you know, the IDF have done far more damage to families in Gaza than what Hamas, which is a separate group of Palestinians, it's not all Palestinians, whatever, but what Hamas has done was horrific. What IDF have done is also horrific, and to not acknowledge that, I find inconceivable. Why we can't see that what one side did was terrible, but also what the other side did also was just as terrible. Why we fail to acknowledge that is absolutely beyond me, and it just shows you how ignorant people like this woman are.
Their futures and leaving babies orphaned.
And why doesn't that argument apply, as I just said, to the Palestinians as well? Crazy shit, man. Crazy shit. I don't understand how she can't even see how illogical all of that is.
This war against the terrorists that Wong and Albanese have decided it's the right time to say that the pathway to peace is to recognise a Palestinian state internationally. Never mind the fact that those in control of Gaza don't want a two-state solution. They want the destruction of Israel.
Before we go on, I need to say that's totally untrue. There are people, as I just said, who have these extreme views, agreed. But there's also a heck of a lot of people in Gaza, Palestinians, who just want peace. They just want to live in their own homes. They want to go to their universities. They want to have their hospitals for their healthcare. They want things that you and I just take for granted. They want them as well. So to argue that all Palestinians just want to eradicate the other side and that all Israelites want to do the same, it's just, or Jews, it's just untrue. It's just untrue. And needs to be called out for what it is. But here's Anna Henderson talking about this with a person who actually has some knowledge and is a professional.
Comments from the Foreign Minister Penny Wong in the last 24 hours talking about Palestinian statehood. This is potentially signalling a policy departure for the Australian government. But what would Australia recognising Palestinian statehood actually mean?
It would unlock full diplomatic relations between Australia and the state of Palestine, both at the bilateral level as well as in multilateral forums. It would enable a greater degree of government-to-government cooperation on everything from law enforcement through to trade and investment. So it would signal that Australia accepts that Palestine is a full member of the international community, entitled to all of the rights and obligations that go with being a government.
What would it mean both for Palestinians and Israelis?
So I think it's an attempt to move forward with a lasting political solution to this long-running conflict. I think the government's signalling that it doesn't think that the existing approach to resolving this conflict has worked. I think it's signalling that Australia believes there is no military solution to this conflict. And I think many decades of violence have proved that that's true. I think the government wants to see the underlying causes of this conflict addressed, which of course include the denial of Palestinian self-determination, which is their right under international law, as well as ensuring the security of Israelis, which is something the government has also emphasised.
If you come out and say the solution to this...
So before we get to Jane Hume's bullshit and Susan Lee's, it's kind of refreshing when we look back on that interview, and that is that there is this desire by the West to resolve this problem, and the only way the problem can be resolved, as most people are saying now, is in a two-state solution. And one wonders why Israel would not want that. And they will mount the argument that they're fearful that Hamas may resurrect itself. We must remember, though, that the leadership in Hamas probably live in Qatar. So they're not going to be necessarily found and discovered by blowing the daylights out of Gaza, that they are elsewhere. So will it mean that people that feel so hostile towards Israel because of what they've done to Gaza and the family members that have been killed, the destruction that they've caused, and they no longer have homes or businesses to go back to, do you think those people are going to be a little bit pissed off with Israel? I reckon they are. Is that likely to breed further military hostility? I reckon it might. So the notion that you're going to destroy Hamas because you tried to destroy the population that they were there to support or to govern, in this case, is pretty remote. So the chances are Hamas will come back. But there again, I think the opportunity here is for the people to vote for a government that perhaps is not Hamas, that is perhaps the Palestinian Liberation Movement or some other group that will offer appropriate governance for the people of Palestine, or in this particular case, Gaza.
Say the solution to this is an independent Palestinian state. You're simply rewarding the actions of terrorists.
Hamas is in charge in the Gaza Strip. And a decision like this by Australia, watched from that region, will be seen, I believe, only as emboldening the terrorists.
It is giving a public relations victory to Hamas for what they did on the 7th of October. The timing is all wrong.
I think it brings more pressure to bear on Israel because it would be increasingly isolated with a dwindling band of states that don't recognise Palestine. In some ways, this is just bringing Australia into line with the reality that the rest of the world accepts. Almost 3/4 of all countries already say Palestine is a state. The United Nations, of course, treats Palestine as a state through the General Assembly. So in some ways, the West is just behind the times, and I think this is just about falling in line with the rest of the international community.
The United Nations is considering, as we understand it, to decide whether to allow Palestine full membership status.
The other is a democratically elected government that, while it's not perfect, although it's probably better than the Albanese government.
Now, I find that so fucking offensive that somehow the Israel government is somehow better than, oh my God. So she's talking about an extreme right-wing government. Netanyahu, when he loses control, will probably go to court and get locked up for charges resulting in some sort of financial fraud. So somehow, how can she even say such a freaking stupid thing as that? I will never know. But I guess that just tells us that Sherry Markson's a moron. It's as simple as that. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to present these two specific arguments. One is the Sherry Markson and the right-wing argument, and the other one is a rational argument by a sensible person who just happens to be at the United Nations in the repertoire for terrorism. So a person with a degree of knowledge, I would think, that would leave Sherry Markson for dead. And I don't mean that figuratively. But it does make us wonder about to what extent we're being fed crap that helps us to ignore actually what's happening in Gaza and the death and destruction of so many people. And that what it would be like to live in that environment where every day you must be wondering whether a bomb is going to land on your vehicle or in your home or in your school, of which there are not anymore, and of which the hospital, of which there are no longer any of them either, and to watch your whole country destroyed, and the world sit back to the likes of Sherry Markson and others and not give a shit. Because the message, from my perspective, is to let people know that there are people that care. That there are people out there who don't see it as a Jewish conflict, who see it as an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, who don't see it as a Hamas and Zionist conflict, who see it as a humanitarian disaster that needs to be resolved. And people like Sherry Markson and others do not offer solutions. They add to the problem by sowing disinformation about actually what's happening in Gaza by failing to mention the number of people that have been killed, way out of proportion to the horrific attack on October the 7th. So let me know what you think. As always, subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications so you can get more crap from me. But let me know what you think also in the comment section below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.